Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Collaborative Culture podcast. My name is Matt Houston. Before we get started, I want you to please like and subscribe to the page. Also, follow us on Spotify and on YouTube. I will also start a Facebook Live or an Instagram Live series, but at this time, you can find us on a couple of social media platforms. I want to thank you for joining us today as we are going to discuss mental health and entrepreneurship. But before we get started, I want to share an evolutionary thought that's happened to me this year as we finished the Thanksgiving holiday, and we are on to Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and I'm shopping for Christmas gifts, and I've realized the evolution of gifts that I'm shopping for. Originally, 10, 15 years ago, early in my adulthood, I was shopping for things like shoes, things for me, fly things for my loved ones. But I'm learning as I get older and I have more responsibilities. My Black Friday and Cyber Monday shopping consists of very family-oriented items, diaper sales, but for our big exciting purchases, appliances, right? And so I just thought this weekend how different the world is to me now that I have a family, and how that plays a part in the discussion that we're going to have today in mental health and entrepreneurship, and that's essentially the fact that times change, things evolve, and I'm as honored I get the same amount of joy shopping, comparing the difference between an LG, a Samsung, or a Frigidaire appliance set during the Thanksgiving holiday. And so I said all of that to say, please buckle up. We have a conversation with a therapist, a friend of mine, Jay, the therapist. She has been in Dallas for several years and has been a professor. She is a counselor, and she's an entrepreneur. And so she's going to give us some nuggets as to her journey from education to corporate America to now entrepreneurship, and how creating boundaries is very important and vital for our overall health. So please enjoy, sit back, and I would love to hear your feedback or to see your feedback in the comment section so we can have this dialogue. Have a good one. Peace. Greetings. Well, I am very excited for this episode of the Collaborative Culture podcast, as we have a special guest who is in the mental health space, someone whom I've known for years since she's arrived in Dallas. We have been a part of community organizations together in the city, and she is not only a licensed therapist, she's an educator, she is an entrepreneur, and today we're going to discuss mental health. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Jay, the therapist, to the Collaborative Culture podcast. Jay, how are you doing?
I am doing well, Matt. Thank you so much for having me here today. Anyone who knows me knows I love to talk about mental health and mental wellness. That is my jam. So I'm excited for the opportunity.
Good deal. Well, before we get started, Jay, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? I knew you first as Jay from Jersey, right? And so tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
I am Jay from Jersey, affectionately known to many far and wide. I am, in fact, from Jersey. It would be weird to be Jay from Jersey if I were not. I moved to Texas about 10 years ago, and apparently was so homesick. My friends nicknamed me Jay from Jersey because they said I talked about home a lot. I'm very happy for the transition that I've made. Texas has been good to me. Jersey will, in fact, always be home. It is where I lived when I got my degree in school and mental health counseling from the University of Pennsylvania. So I am a South Jersey girl, not to be confused with those Northern New Jerseyers who claim New York. I am not. I am a Southern New Jersey girl. Grew up across the bridge from Philadelphia, and in that process really found my own mental health journey that made me want to be able to be a resource to others. And so here we are.
Good deal. Well, let's before we take a deep dive into the topic today, I want to get a bit of a cultural education, a cultural lesson in the East Coast, because you stated the North Jersey, South Jersey type distinction. As a guy from Texas, we think everything is bigger and better here, and so give me your assessment of being a Texan for 10 years, because we're claiming you, and the difference in how you grew up.
Y'all can claim me. I'm always gonna claim Jersey, but I think that having lived in two geographically different locations of the United States is something I encourage a lot of people to do. Kind of like you said, everything's bigger in Texas. And so I'll have friends from up north say, "Oh, I'm gonna be in Austin this week. Why don't we grab dinner?" And I'm like, we will not be grabbing dinner. Because when I get off of work, I'm not driving 4 hours to come and have dinner with you. You won't want to eat with me by then anyway. And so I think that some of these geographical differences, they're actually really impactful in why we see some of the things that we see in America, because we just really don't understand how vastly different one culture in one country can be. But it's because the country is so large. Um, I remember my first job here, I was told I was rude, and it was because I would come to work and I would say hello and how you doing, and then I would sit down and get to work, and there is a much more congenial and chatty environment in Texas than up north. That's why people say New Yorkers are rude. They're not rude, they're just very focused on where they're going, and you are in their way because you don't know where you're going.
Oh, okay, I got you. That makes all the sense in the world. I do want to big up you on your advice as to living in different geographical areas. I've been a native Dallasite. I've lived here my entire life, but particularly in my 20s, I made it a point to travel and mobily live elsewhere so that I can be engulfed in different cultures across the country. I've spent an extended time in Washington, D.C. When I was starting a business, and we would commute to D.C. for federal types of initiative meetings and things of that nature. So I would be there maybe 2-3 weeks out of the month at some stint, and I just
Mm-hmm.
learned different cultures. But at the same time, I hear the how people view Texans, right? As much as, do you all have horses and drive pickup trucks? Ironically, I did drive a pickup truck at the time, and I was wearing boots. So I was playing part of that stereotype, but also some things that weren't as accurate as you stated. Also, my last name is Houston, so whenever I introduce myself, people assume that I'm from Houston, and so people would say, "Oh, when I'm in Texas, I'll connect with you when I'm in Houston." So okay, that's great. It could be a phone call because I'm not going to see you, right?
Right.
Because essentially, Texas is five separate cities, right? Five separate regions. I call it
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, which has its own properties, San Antonio, and El Paso, or West Texas, right? And so,
Yeah.
and don't want to leave out East Texas, right? That's where my people are. And so, so six regions essentially, at least in my culture, of Texans that are very distinct. So you're absolutely right on that, and I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because it's important for us to know that other people, other cultures exist. I'm also giggling about your assessment of the workplace. Um, I am one of those who think, I should say, in current, in present tense of the abruptness, or I don't want to call it rude, but very straightforward, very focused culture that other regions of the country bring. With which brings up another question. With North Texas being a hub of people moving in, this is essentially a transient north. This is a transient region. As you like you said, you're here. Um, what are your thoughts on how culture is being shaped here in North Texas, specifically by having a melting pot of people from all over the region, all over the country, establish their new homes here?
So what I find interesting about that is you can look at our like historical voting and how over the last couple of years they say Dallas has gone purple when it
Mm,
was previously very red, and I believe that that is reflective of people from California and the northern states, which are historically blue, moving to a quote unquote red state. And so it is not just shifting culture, it's shifting the political landscape.
mm,
Um, it's a stretch, and it's figuring out how to make room for people. It's the idea of DEI, that it's not just enough to let people have a seat at the table, but really how do we make this person feel included? How do we make this person feel as though they belong? And so we see culture shifting. The bullet train just will not die, and I believe that that is because people are moving from states, from parts of the country where traversing from one place to another is much easier. And
yeah.
so I even think that is part of the cultural shift that we're seeing, people from other areas coming to Texas and wanting that accessibility that they had back in California, back in New York, back in the northern hemisphere of the northern part of the country.
That's a great assessment because Texas is definitely a vehicular state, and we are growing. The change from red to now purple, and we can there are data points in the last several election cycles. One in the gubernatorial election when Beto was running for governor, and even now in this state where there are more urban centers that are blue counties. I think that we're seeing that Tarrant County is turning more blue. Dallas has already been a blue county. Austin has been a deep blue county, as well as Harris County, where Houston resides, and Bexar County, where San Antonio is. And so we normally would see urban centers be the Democratic epicenter. I'm not making this a political podcast, but it's showing how the change in population from, like you said, in California, from the DMV area up to New York, as the economy grows here in this state, we see the influx of those type of those type of employees moving here as corporate
Mm-hmm.
headquarters are moving to the state, how it's changing the political landscape. And so it's interesting to see the cultural change here. I remember thinking, I have no idea the purpose of a train in Texas, because my dream since I was 5 years old was to own my own car so I can be independent and go anywhere, right? I didn't understand the concept of public transportation holistically
Mm-hmm.
until visiting Washington, D.C., and then catching a train from D.C. to New York and realizing that there were 4 or 5 stops in major metropolitan cities. That is the norm
Yeah.
if you're living on the East Coast. And it was fascinating. I remember listening to a Bill Withers album as I was traveling um, up the coast, up the East Coast, and thinking this is very serene. Um, I get to see people. I see different types of cities in a 3 to 4 hour time period, instead of me being in Texas and focusing on traffic, road rage, if you will.
Right.
And so that's a very interesting point. With that said, I want us to talk about our subject, our topic today. which is mental health. As we have changes in culture, we have changes in our individual lives. Um, there are there's a need for us to address individually and personally how we adjust to those changes. Right, we are in 2023, and we've experienced a pandemic for 2.5, 3 years that significantly impacted our quality of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And individuals like yourselves, healthcare individuals, have, for better or for worse, been more in the forefront of or becoming more illuminated in this space as we are coping with this space. So, my first question to you is, what what was your mental health journey? What made you decide to go into mental health as a professional?
So I would say in my early 20s, early mid 20s, I went to therapy myself and I found it very difficult to find a therapist that I like felt connected to, felt related to, that I could relate to rather. Um Most of the therapists were white. Even if they were not white, they were much older than me. And so it just felt like, talking to a parent, which I'm sure they had sage wisdom, but it left me lacking for a connection. And so over time, I, being the person I am, I was like, well, if I don't see it, I'm a fix it by becoming it. And so I became a therapist. I also wanted a therapist who just was much more relatable. I think that strides are being made now to make therapy more personable, but a lot of things were like best practices where it was like you had to fit into a box to be like fixed or to go through the therapy process instead of not feeling like my therapist was meeting me where I was at. And just some of the euphemisms and colloquialisms and the way that I speak and my tone and inclinations, I wanted my therapist to talk like I talked. And so that led me on a journey. At the time, I was getting my teaching certification, and a professor shared this program with me. And it was like, that's it. That's the thing I want. Because part of my education journey, my journey as an educator, was I was raised by a mom who was a teacher. And so that afforded me a lot of, I call it insider knowledge, but I felt like that should not be an anomaly, that if more kids just had the knowledge that my teacher mom had, they could grow by leaps and bounds. And so then as I embarked on my mental health journey, I felt like if my students and other young adults had the information that I was gaining from therapy, they could grow by leaps and bounds. And so I kind of took it up as my own mantle to be that person for them.
Wow. And this was around 2011, 2012, because you were actually in corporate America before, correct?
Yes. So, fun fact, I used to be a financial service rep with MetLife.
Huh.
Uh,
Selling that
yes,
insurance.
I did. I also was like an office manager. So I've had a couple of different careers, couple different jobs, we'll say. But always found myself in the helping space. So, if a new person started, it was my job to train them. If somebody was having a bad day, they were going to seek me out and we would have a conversation to kind of help them figure out what to do and get through the day. And so throughout that, made the transition into the mental health, into the education space and into the mental health space, wanting to have a more purposeful career.
Okay. Good. And that makes perfect sense because you said that you've been here for about 10 years. I remember you joining the YP fold around 2012, 2013. So that's very active. That's very accurate. And I do remember you having the giving personality. You were always engaged in community organizations, community programming. And so that's a natural fit. So, so
Indeed.
now in this space, you went from corporate America to teaching to education. You were a professor at one point, correct? And you were
I
teaching
was,
at a community college at a junior college here. What subjects were
yes.
you teaching?
So actually, I taught English as a second language and I taught a GED course. I never got into a path or a track as far as degrees, but it was more an extension of my K through 12 education just for adults. And that
Mm.
was actually some really rewarding work, especially working with my ESL students. Um, their tenacity, their stick to itness, and all those other things, and their kindness and their grace just always inspired me to show up,
Yeah,
no
you can
matter what
tell.
was.
Well, their intentionality for knowledge is apparent, right? Because it's a different energy than someone who is, I don't want to say take for granted, but who's in a space of privilege, knowing the culture, kind of knowing the system that's happening, having someone who's been at another location, and see the opportunity that they are in now, trying to gain that education. I definitely understand, and I see that as I teach at UNT Dallas, and undergrads, with undergrads who are ESL students, or who just are from families, who immigrant families who are trying to make their mark here.
Right.
I see common threads in this conversation, and that's helping people. And so, um, I want this conversation to go twofold. One, selfishly, I
Mm-hmm.
want to have a conversation to help make me feel better. I don't want to spend $200 for a therapy session on today, but would definitely want to talk to you about how my life has been impacted these last several years, um, especially since I've been seeking mental health care individuals, particularly during the pandemic. I do
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about the difference in my philosophy, in my mindset of therapy, because I recall my first therapy session was in undergrad. I was in college. I was probably 19 or 20 years old. I did not
Mm-hmm.
take it seriously. I was in a very similar situation. It was someone that did not look like me. It seemed like they were checking boxes. I was checking boxes because I essentially was forced to go to this to 4 or 5 sessions, because of something that's happened on campus, and so I wasn't all in. Um, but then I've had significant life changes afterwards, right? I had the death of my father and my brother, in which I self coped, and which I'm learning now wasn't the best decision for me, and could have hindered my mental health journey, or at least
Yes.
health wise, for years, until discovering the importance of actually talking to someone. And so, as a mental health professional, why is it important for people to talk to someone about their feelings, their emotions, their state of mind?
Well, first and foremost, humans are social beings. There's not one human on earth that makes it through this thing called life without human interaction. Even people who have neurodiversity diagnoses, they still have some sense and need of community, of social support. But I think primarily mental health has gotten a bad rap. It's like, oh, you're crazy. What's wrong with you? Even I'll have couples and they're like, well, I didn't want to come to couples counseling because nothing's wrong with our relationship. And it's like, well, I don't wait to go to the doctor when I am dying. I try to get it in front of that. And so it's that thought process that I want more people to apply to therapy. Like nothing is wrong. So let me go in and just download life and, you know, fine tune, get some oil on these hinges, and allow me to go back out in this world a better version of me. But also, being in crisis is not the times for like growth and evolution. And so,
Mm.
if I am trying to grow, if I am trying to evolve, those peaceful, quote unquote, nothing is wrong times of my life is the best time to go to therapy. I don't want to wait till it hits the fan and then I got to catch my therapist up on the last 16 years of my life, plus this crisis that I'm in the middle of. And so, if we can just find someone who is a trusted, non-partisan, as they say in the political world, since we've thrown some politics in here a little bit. But when I go to my friends far too often my friends just want to make me feel better. They don't want to help me be better. And even with the best of intentions, they have biased opinions, they have vested interest in me. You know, we're not in a society that educates us on how to hold space for the full breadth of human emotions. So if I'm crying, my friend is just trying to do whatever they can to make me stop, instead
Oh, yeah.
of a therapist is going to allow me to sit with those feelings and find and navigate my way through them.
So, wow, that's a great point. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that resonated with me quickly, because one of my love languages, shouts out to my wife, whom, when we started dating, our early conversations was identifying love languages so that we could effectively communicate our emotions. Is words of affirmation, and sometimes I just need an encouraging word, or someone just to feel that they're with me when I'm in crisis. And as an entrepreneur, the amount of chaos in my world is constant. And so you said something earlier in terms of trying to seek medical help, trying to seek mental health help when you're at a static space, or when it's in a space where you're not in chaos. But what for specifically for entrepreneurs or people who have a lot going on, young family, bills that needs to be paid, all sorts of things that just piles on. How can you balance being a friend? And I'm speaking on for me personally, I'm not speaking for anyone else, right? How can we create a space where we can be affirming, so that we can have confidence, and feel good, but also address what needs to be done, by sitting in our emotions and planning how we get out of it.
So I would say three things. One, systems. Even the most eclectic, artistic person thrives with systems and structure, right? So, me as a therapist, people reach out for therapy. At this point, I have a template that I essentially copy and paste every time. Instead of it would be a quick 2 minute email to type, but then there's like thought and effort and energy and distraction that's pulling me away from something else. Whereas if I could just copy and paste this, change like 3 days and send it off, it is a much lower lift. And so I think that we as people need to figure out what is my system that works for me. I'm not a morning person. As much as I listen to the Kevin Harts and all the people of the world telling me to get up at 5 a.m. because the early bird gets the worm and that's the best time to work out, that's me setting myself up for failure, because that's not my system. That's not my system that I flourish in. And so finding our own system that we flourish in is important. In that vein, because I tried it once and it did not work, that doesn't mean that the system doesn't work. It means it may need to be tweaked. It may mean that I'm in the wrong system, but it doesn't mean that I should not have a system. The second thing I think is that we need to get comfortable with the word no. No is a full and complete sentence. I don't owe you an explanation. I don't even owe myself an explanation for why I say no. It can help for me to understand why I am saying things and my motivation behind things. But in this hustle culture that we have, I think that we're saying yes to way too many things and we're stretching ourselves way too thin. There's only so much brain power that we have to exert. Somewhere I read many years ago that, like, if you're focusing on more than three things, you have too many things on your plate. I like to say, three things in any given category. So my family, I might be focused on three specific things within that space. Within my business, I might have three initiatives that I'm pushing. But saying no and offloading things off of my plate, whether that's delegating, hiring an assistant, or just saying this can't be my priority at this time because I don't have the appropriate bandwidth to give to it. And then along those lines, I would say the third thing is asking for help, whether it is going to a therapist or it is asking a friend, family member, coworker, peer. As an entrepreneur, I'm always asking people, what do you do in your business? How does your business thrive? What do you do with this? Tell me more about it. Instead of just feeling like I have to know it all, be it all, and figure it all out on my own.
Those are all amazing. Those are all amazing advice, and we want to definitely note that in. We're definitely going to note that in the description of the podcast. And so, um, I want to talk a little bit about your journey and how you became you've gotten into this space. Was there a specific moment or a situation when you realized people are naturally drawn to you for advice and support?
Um, so when I was in undergrad, my junior year, was it my junior year? It was like junior or sophomore year. My godfather got very sick. My biological father got very sick. But my place was the hub. You know, we had Sunday dinners and I was the person everybody wanted to come talk to. And I remember my best friend in college getting very upset with all the people coming to me with their stuff because she's like, I don't know why y'all keep talking to her. She has her own stuff too.
Mm,
But it was just very evident that for whatever reason, people were very comfortable. And like I said earlier, that was just a trend that followed me throughout my life. I am not a therapist because I want to be one. I am a therapist because this is God's purpose for my life. If it were up to me, I would like have a corner office and not talk to anyone, but like create widgets and spreadsheets. Um, but I recognize that my life's journey has made me uniquely positioned to have compassion and empathy and understanding and kind of what I like to say is hear between the words that people say. And so I'm leaning into that. And I would say my more recent like epiphany or aha was probably in the last 5 years, probably more specifically during the pandemic, where many of my clients were just like, I just look forward to this day because I know like I'm gonna leave therapy and feel so much better. And for me, I'm doing my job, which I enjoy. I'm being present, I'm validating, I'm hearing experiences, reflecting, giving feedback. But it just became very I just became very aware that whatever I was doing or saying was deeply impacting others in a way that was improving what they felt their quality of life was. And for some of these people, this wasn't their first therapy go round, but for whatever reason, it was their most impactful. And so I was like, all right, we're going to do this thing.
that's that sparked another thought in my mind, in that I don't we don't as laymen don't really consider the mental health professionals personal baggage and personal trauma and issues as we are piling it on to you hour after hour, especially during the last few years in which mental health appointments have been increasing
Mm-hmm.
drastically. You all have been burdened with other people's stuff. How are you able to release your trauma or address your mental health concerns?
Well, first and foremost, if your therapist does not have a therapist, you should probably find a new therapist. So I absolutely have my own therapist that I see for my own stuff. And kind of like I was saying before, where you might have a therapist, a couples therapist, but you have an individual therapist. I have my own individual therapist, but I also have someone that I can tap, a community of professionals if I have a particularly difficult client or something that they're facing and it's weighing on me and I need some support, I need some feedback. But I call it the teacher phenomenon. So I remember when I was working in the classroom, I went to Walmart one day and saw one of my students and they looked at me and was like, "What are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here? I'm here with my mom shopping. I'm here by myself shopping." It's like, "Well, what are you getting?" "Toilet tissue." Like, what do you mean? And so I think that sometimes the people who are closest to us in like help and support, we forget they're people just like us. But at the same time, my teacher should be a teacher and my teacher should go to Walmart and buy their necessities. And so I say that in the sense that I would never like feel bad for burdening my teacher with teaching me. And so I don't think that individuals should use that terminology with therapists. This is the job that I signed up for. Are there times that may be more difficult than others, yes. But part of my training in school, getting my degree, was to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, but also to sustain myself as an individual. I'm definitely on top of my own self-care and my evaluation, but also as a helping professional, I'm constantly checking in and making sure that I'm taking care of myself. It's not my client's responsibility to take care of me. And as much as my friends and family love me, it's not their job to take care of me. It's their job to be there and support me. I take care of me.
Got you. No, I mean therapists are people too, and that's a great assessment. And I live that as well. When I've seen my students in spaces, especially because I live close, I'm in close proximity to the university. They would see me somewhere, and it seems like I'm an alien. And
Right.
like, no, I mean I still need to get gas. Like my car, I still need that. We don't have public transportation like Jersey or the East Coast yet, and so um, I'm still a regular citizen just like you are. That's a really great perspective on that. How can I, as an entrepreneur, someone who is a layman in this space, what are some tips for me outside of building systems? I think that was an amazing 3 point process that you stated there. How can I improve my mental health space as an individual?
So I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, they are chasing a lot of different things. And this is not to say that you should not have goals and objectives and you should not be working and striving towards them. I was actually talking with a client earlier today, and we were saying how every client is not your client. Everyone who's in your space is not your peer. And I think that as entrepreneurs, we have to remember that. So, if you're fiscally able to walk away from a client, you've done your due diligence, this isn't in alignment, let me refer you to someone else who can support you. But likewise, there are the internet has messed the game up. Like, there's no other way to say that. And so I think that we have to be conscious of what we're consuming on the internet, because people can appear to be in our same space or in our same lane, but they really are not. And so I think those two things, being conscious of the clients that you take on, but also being sure not to allow comparison to be the thief of your joy and your own path, are two just foundational things when it comes to maintaining your own mental health. And then the third thing would be divorcing yourself from hustle culture. People have come to wear it as a badge of honor. I got 5 hours of sleep last night because I was working on my dreams. You know what I was doing? I was dreaming my dreams. I got my 7, 8 hours of sleep last night, because your body literally needs the rest. Your mind literally needs the rest to perform at its optimal pace. And so if you're not doing that, how long are you going to sustain that? It's only a matter of time before your body is going to like revolt against you and starts to break down. There was a time period in my life where I just wasn't sleeping for a variety of reasons, and I developed migraines. And so that's just one example of how, if your body doesn't get the rest that it needs, it will like attack itself. And we don't, and once you're there, what good are you to anyone or yourself? So yeah, divorce yourself from hustle culture.
That is an amazing assessment because you're absolutely right. I've had to deprogram myself to use lack of sleep as a badge of honor as an entrepreneur. Right. I used to I have a mindset that I'm currently changing. That I'm always go 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 go, and that is not always the best route to take. It's not the best route to take because especially when you are cultivating relationships, when you are in a relationship like a marriage, and you have roles like being a husband, being a father, being a caregiver to your mother, and having students that you need to engage with. Um, you have to spend time in investing in yourself, and
Right.
you have to sleep is key. Um, but also being able to understand that being an entrepreneur doesn't mean you have to work 20 hours a day like I've done in my past. And so
And I
thank you.
think to that point, so This year is actually the first year that I am a full-time private practice therapist. Prior to this, I worked in training and development spaces as my full-time job, and therapy was my part-time job. And I had to learn that balance between having a full-time job while cultivating this side hustle, essentially, because it was my part-time job. And through that process, I had to learn balance and boundaries. And one of the things that I tell people is we like to talk about how much other people don't respect boundaries. Boundaries is a buzzword these days. But the first person who respects or disrespects your boundaries is yourself. And so in this, making sure that I'm taking care of myself, making sure that other people are being respectful of me, what boundaries have I set for myself that I am honoring or dishonoring? And if other people are dishonoring my boundaries, what systems have I set up to allow this? And so specifically with time, there are certain days of the week that it's a no. I'm not doing anything because those are my sacred time, whether it's to like spend time with myself and recharge, to take care of things in the house. Now, granted, it might come up to that time period and I'm feeling unexpectedly energetic, and so I might call a friend and go out, but I still have kept that time sacred for me, for what I am able to show up for. And actually, like, I have on my website, I also have a store, and I have a shirt on there that says rest is required, not earned. And I think that when I say divorce from hustle culture and take care of yourself, that's what I mean. We don't earn our rest. It is required. Sleep is sleep, but rest is rest. And those are two different words for two very different reasons. And so if we can begin to shift our mindsets as entrepreneurs, that for me to be the best entrepreneur possible, I need to rest as well as sleep, we can then begin to do monumental things.
You dropping nuggets over here, Jay. This is good. Any last thoughts on this topic of mental health specifically for an entrepreneur?
I think my parting words would be that you are a person first and innately valuable and worthy of all the things. You just happen to work for yourself, and that is your job. That is not your defining of you.
That's good. Jay, I want to thank you not only for being a mental health professional that's investing in the lives of people, not only here, but abroad. But I want to thank you for being a community member who just wants to help people in general. And thank you for being a friend, not only of the podcast, but of me personally, because people like you give me the energy to do whatever I do. So thank you for spending time on this Collaborative Culture podcast. And thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you for having me. Anytime I get to speak about mental wellness, I am there.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, there you have it. That is Jay, the therapist. Before we leave, could you give us some information on how people can contact you or things that you're doing in the future that we can promote?
So my website is simply jthetherapist.com. That is the letter J, thetherapist.com. That's also how you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. On TikTok and Instagram, it's j.the.therapist. I currently do individual therapy sessions as well as wellness workshops and team development for companies and organizations to help them have a healthy culture and team dynamics. And those are the places you can find me and ways we can connect.
Thanks, Jay. You have a great one. All right.
Thanks. You too.